I kissed her, not with the caution of a nobleman, nor with the coldness of a man who knows what he ought to do, but with the urgency of someone who, at last, found himself before the only thing that could save him and destroy him, and she did not retreat. Elena, with her trembling mouth, her skin chilled by the winter, and the absurd warmth of a heart I should never have touched, she let me in, and now I no longer knew how to get out. Since that night, something in me had stopped obeying. Reason, the title, the name I inherited. The problem with loving someone unconditionally is that you begin to forget the conditions that kept you whole. And when a duke forgets who he is, when he loves with hunger, he becomes a man standing before the abyss. And I was about to fall. This is part 2 of The Forbidden Passion of the Duke of Ravenshire. If you haven't heard part 1 yet, the link is in the pinned comment and also in the cards on the screen. I recommend you start with it to feel every beat of this love that was born of scorn and now challenges everything that is permissible. And if you have already lived every emotion of part 1, prepare yourself. From now on, nothing will be the same. If this story moved you, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and follow every chapter of this passion that does not yield, even in the face of the impossible.
If silence weighs more than guilt, it is because the heart has already chosen. The first thing I noticed was not the morning cold. It was the weight of his cloak over the armchair. There, where the night had ended in silence and urgency, the dark blue fabric, heavy and impeccable, rested like an absent presence, folded precisely over the carved wood, as if it dared not remain where he was not. The fire in the fireplace crackled low, spreading warmth across the floorboards. But it was that item, that cloak, that wrapped around me again, not on my shoulders, but within me. It was beneath that fabric that he had gathered me from the wind the night before, wrapped my trembling body, and sheltered me as if, for an instant, my place had always been next to him, as if that mantle and the arms beneath it were my true refuge, and that frightened me more than the kiss itself. Not the warmth, not the touch, but what I felt when I was pulled against his chest and heard his breath near my skin. What I felt when the pain of absence seemed for one night to no longer exist. Security, belonging, completeness. 3 words I never dared to want, and which now inhabited me, as if a part of me, hitherto unknown, had finally found home. But it was a home that did not belong to me, not by birth, not by right, and certainly not by permission. My hand touched the fabric with cold fingers. I wanted to give it back. I wanted to return it to him. But what I truly wanted was for the Duke to wrap me up again, without the mantle, without reservation, without any lie or impediment between us. I closed my eyes for a moment, and everything returned with the cruel precision of reality. The kiss, the second kiss, the way he whispered my name as if the whole world could hear him, the urgency, the truth, and then the nothingness, the absence, foolish, 1,000 times foolish. I rose calmly. The cold floor beneath my feet served as an anchor for what little judgment I had left. I dressed slowly, a dark gray dress of thick wool, long sleeves, a high collar buttoned to the neck, as if the discipline of the fabric could contain what bubbled beneath my skin. I pinned up my hair with more rigor than necessary, not out of vanity, but out of fear that something might escape, as if a new, restless, impossible to ignore secret pulsed within me. I descended the stairs in silence. The air of the house was different, not cold, but suspended, as if the walls knew and waited. In the corridor, I found Joan. She was carrying an arrangement of fresh flowers for the drawing room, but upon seeing me, she stopped. Her gaze rested on me with tenderness and a subtle trace of concern. "Is Miss well?" she asked without rush, but with sincere kindness. I nodded, trying to smile. "Yes, Joan. Only, I miss Lady Agatha." My voice came out more shaky than I expected. Joan smiled sadly. Her eyes softened. "We all do, miss. But in your case, she left a space that no one else can occupy." I nodded gently, agreeing with her observation. "Joan, could you inform me if the Duke has already woken?" The words left my mouth before I could reason. "Your Grace has been in his study since before dawn," she added, as if wishing to ease the burden of silence. "According to his valet who confided in us in the kitchen, he did not go to his quarters last night and also refused. Breakfast. He only asked not to be disturbed. I think the sorrow of mourning consumes him, Miss Marlowe. My heart raced without permission. Indeed. With your leave, I murmured. Joan bowed discreetly and went on her way. And I stood there for an instant, motionless, thinking if he had woken with the same taste as I did, with the same memory of the night the world stopped, if he would have, even for a second, regretted having touched my lips with his in such an intense and unforgettable way, or worse, if he was considering that it was a mistake.
Duty first. Always duty. That was the invisible oath sewn into my family's coat of arms, more than in the tapestries, more than in the signet rings or the wax seals. It was imprinted on my skin from my first breath, to command before feeling, to represent before existing. I sat before the desk as I did every day. The solid wood, the smell of the leather folders, the weight of the decisions that never cease, reports from the tenants, requests from Parliament, correspondence from the Crown Chancellor, everything with its proper weight. But my eyes did not read, because my mind still held her, the delicate curve of her nape beneath my fingers, the broken breath against my mouth, the almost imperceptible tremor of her body. When she gave me everything without saying a word, I kissed her, not as one kisses a lady's companion, but as a man kisses the woman who makes him forget he is a duke. And since then, nothing in me has returned to center. How could it? How to continue pretending I did not see the truth in her eyes, when she, so serene, so sweet, allowed me to exist without titles, without a past, without guilt, simply as a man. I sighed deeply. The collar felt tighter than usual. I discreetly loosened the linen cravat, unbuttoned the top button of my shirt and stood up. What would become of me if I were not the heir to lands and silence? And what if, for one day, I could simply love her, without having to justify it to whom? My hand slid to the window. The panes were cold, and the world outside continued in its habitual quietness. But then I saw her, in the garden, enveloped in shades of grey and wind, the simple dress that concealed the form I now recognized, not through physical proximity, but through the unique way she existed in my space, and beside her, Thomas Whitlow, the gardener, with his gentle speech, his pure manners, his simple life. He spoke. She smiled, discreetly, with that reserve that disarms me so much. For a moment, the noblest of thoughts invaded me. Let her go. She deserves peace. She deserves to be loved without the shadow of scandal, without judging eyes, without the chains of the name I bear on my shoulders. She could be happy, without me. But then, my fists clenched, because there was something in me that did not know how to let her go, because I wanted to be the man capable of giving her everything, and not just the one who touches her in the dark, and disappears by morning. I closed my eyes for an instant, the image of her fat among the flowers being looked at by another, hurt, and not out of pride, but because she was the only fragment of truth left in my life, and yet the only one I might not be able to have.
The air still carried the remnants of the snowstorm from the night before. The stones of the path were damp, and the garden exhaled a clean scent of washed earth and leaves yielded to the wind. The sky, gray and low, seemed to hold its morning breath, as if it too hesitated to tell what it knew. I found Thomas near the greenhouse, collecting the dry branches that the frost had left behind. His sleeves were rolled up, as usual, and his hands were covered in earth and care. Mr. Whitlow, I greeted with a light nod. He raised his eyes, surprised, but smiling. Miss Marlowe, he replied, with his habitual simple reverence. The cold seems not to have frightened you away. The cold demands routine, I retorted with serenity. And today, I have a request. I pointed to the pots arranged along the wall of the greenhouse. Miss Imogen will arrive next week. I would like to decorate her quarters with something delicate, yet vibrant. Perhaps lavender, verbena, or something that suggests lightness. He nodded, his eyes fixed on me for a second longer than necessary. I will do so with pleasure. He bent down again to the roots, carefully removing a marigold seedling. After a brief silence, his voice reached me again. I wanted to know if you liked the book. It took me a moment to understand. The book of Scottish poetry he had given me a few weeks earlier, even before everything. Yes, I murmured with a half smile. Burns has a curious gift. of speaking as if words were flowers, soft, yet with hidden thorns. I saw that this pleased him. He stood up, his eyes attentive. "There is a verse you might find meaningful. Say it." He took a deep breath, his gaze touching mine as one treads on fragile ground. "My love is like the melody that sweetly played in tune." For a second, I did not answer. He looked away, as if he had gone too far, but his voice returned, lower, firmer. "I dare not plant what I cannot reap, Miss Marlowe." "Thomas," I began, not knowing what I would say. "Do not worry," he interrupted, gentle, yet resolute. "I do not expect answers your eyes have already given me. I only wanted you to know that if one day there is space in your heart, even a small one, I would receive it with joy. But if there is not, I will be here anyway, as a friend, and as one who desires your peace." I found no words. I merely inclined my head with contained gratitude, and I withdrew, with soft steps, and a heart a little more perturbed.
The house was quieter than usual, or perhaps it was I who was louder inside. In the reading room, Julian was already waiting for me, seated by the lit fireplace, with his legs crossed and the same account book for the properties that I had sent him days earlier. His eyes moved from the pages to me as soon as I entered, with that tranquility that always exasperated me, and at the same time, sustained me. "Did you receive Haddington's last letter?" I asked, removing my gloves and settling before the warmth. "It arrived yesterday afternoon. The fences on the western boundary gave way more than we imagined. The winter was severe. I sent James with trustworthy men. They must reinforce it with stone before the rains return. Good decision. Better that than losing the pasture to the neighbor without even a protest." He closed the book with a firm, yet restrained gesture. "And the tenants' payments? Most are current, but the widow Cormac asked for an extension." "Grant it." Julian raised an eyebrow. "Without conditions. She lost 2 sons last winter. It hardly seems appropriate to charge her more than fate has already taken." He looked at me for a moment, as one studying another layer behind the words, but he did not insist. He merely leaned back in the armchair, crossing his arms. "Imogen arrives next week." I nodded. "Ship leaves France tomorrow. She will be in London in 2 days. She will need rest before the journey here. Do you want me to fetch her?" "Yes. She will prefer to see a familiar face and a lighter one." Pause. "Has she written?" 2 letters, brief and formal." Julian sighed, without losing his amiable tone. "Which means she is more hurt than she cares to admit." I nodded again. "Aunt Agatha always said that, among the 3 of us, Imogen is the one who most resembled her, and the one who least tolerated being read. She withdrew after that business. With the Marquis of Beresford, or after the way people treated her for not being the one who rejected him first." Julian looked into the fire. "She will return changed. Everyone returns changed." We were silent for a moment, the kind of silence that exists between brothers who know exactly what they are not saying. "Make sure the carriage is comfortable, and take something sweet and familiar, made by our kitchen. It will bring comfort." Imogen likes to pretend she doesn't care about kindnesses, but she does. Julian smiled discreetly. "I already thought of taking lemon sponge cake." "Perfect." My gaze wandered to the high windows. There was accumulated snow on the eaves, and the wind whispered in the stained glass windows with the sound of a confession. Julian observed me for an instant. "Is there anything else?" I shook my head. "No, but there is something you are not saying." I raised my eyes and he did not smile. "Pay attention. Hadrian, the property that demands the most vigilance is always the one we think is safe." I did not answer, because it was not land he spoke of, and because I no longer knew how to protect what I felt.
The snow had melted on the edge of the windows, but the cold remained suspended in the air, not the cold of the seasons, but the one that lingers between unspoken words and unmade choices. That morning, the village chapel bells tolled punctually, and with them came the news. Lady Imogen had disembarked in the capital. She would be in Ravenshire by nightfall. The staff moved in haste, but without fuss, as happens when one awaits the visit of someone who, though long absent, still holds the power to move walls with the mere mention of their name. Lord Adrian's younger sister. I had never met her, but Lady Agatha spoke of her with a combination of pride and tenderness, and a certain melancholy, like one who knows a soul made of light yet wounded by too many shadows. I went to the garden to pick flowers for an arrangement by her bedside. Fresh lavender, a few sprigs of rosemary, and at the center, a single white rose surviving the late winter. Not for beauty, but for the promise that something can endure. In the late afternoon, with the house scented by tea and tension, the dark carriage passed through the wrought iron gates, and then she emerged. Tall, impeccable posture. The light veil covering her light brown hair did not conceal the fierce gleam in her eyes. Intense and deep eyes, like her brother's, but with a flame more curious than contained. She dressed as one who knew her own worth, without undue ostentation, and yet there was an aura of rebellious royalty about her. Imogen Blackmoor, with a slight smile on her lips, and the weight of something unresolved on her shoulders. I was formally introduced in the piano antechamber, under the supervision of Lord Julian and the housekeeper, who watched every detail like a general awaiting a king's visit. Curtsying with discretion, I said only, "It is an honor to welcome you back to Ravenshire, milady." She studied me in silence for an instant, a silence more incisive than any word. Then she inclined her head slightly and smiled. "You are Miss Elena, are you not?" I nodded. "I read about you in the letter, the last one my aunt sent me before her passing. She spoke of you with such admiration that it almost made me jealous." I smiled, unsure what to say. She approached, and her voice dropped to a softer tone. "By your manners, your posture, your gaze, I perceive my aunt did not exaggerate." My eyes lowered, not from shyness, but out of respect. I did not expect so much, neither from that look, nor from that tone. And then, he entered, the Duke. His presence filled the drawing room before he even spoke a word. The air seemed to change density, as if every particle stiffened before something inevitable. And I thought I was prepared, but when our gazes crossed for a breath of time, I perceived the delicate lie I wore. His too steady to be casual. Mine desired to be neutral. It failed. I felt it. On my skin, in my core, in the pulse that quickened like one in a hurry to flee. Without moving a muscle, Imogen to my left, with studied elegance, delicately placed one of her gloves on the side table, and in her eyes, a discreet gleam, not inquisitive, just too attentive to be accidental. "Thank you for the reception, Miss Marlowe," she said with genuine courtesy, without letting slip the slight trace of humor on her lips. "We shall see each other later." I curtsied with discretion, offering a final gesture of respect to them both, and I left the room, with soft steps, but not without carrying beneath the wool dress the weight of a gaze that still burned on my back.
I entered the drawing room and I saw her, Elena, between Imogen and Julian, as if she had always belonged to that scene, yet was the one thing I could not control. My gaze found her, and hers struck me like a recollection too recent to be a memory. The days we spent without seeing each other seemed to compress into that instant, as if time wished to exact its price, and my interior trembled, not from guilt, but from knowing, with devastating certainty, that my ruin was not silence. It was her. I diverted my gaze to Imogen, grateful for her arrival, and for allowing me an escape from that fleeting and yet overwhelming moment, while she dismissed Elena. My sister arrived as she always had, as if the world were hers by right, not by title but by personality. "Your Grace," she said with a theatrical, belated reverence, before gracefully sinking into the sofa before the fireplace. "Has the residence survived my absence, or did boredom destroy its walls before that?" I crossed my arms, allowing myself a rare wry smile. "It survived, but the mirrors complained of your absence." She rolled her eyes with charm as she poured herself a cup of steaming tea. "As kind as ever, and twice as exhausted. And you are twice as insolent. Insolence is my only luxury, you see. You men have properties. I have well-placed phrases." I sat in the opposite armchair. She studied me for an instant longer than comfortable. "So, you are not going to ask me how I am? Would you tell the truth?" She hesitated. Then she placed the cup on the corner table with a slight clink. "No." We remained silent for an instant. The kind of silence only siblings know, sown with gaps, unspoken gestures, and memories that refuse to be forgotten. "Why did you return, Imogen?" I asked, without harshness. She looked into the fire, and for a moment, something in her face fell away. Because there are places that, even when they wound us, call us back. Her gaze remained fixed on the flames. And because I grew tired of pretending I was made of steel, Aunt Agatha was the last person who looked at me as if I still had something noble left in me. There was a slight tremor in her voice, but with elegance she disguised it with a sigh. "I miss her," I murmured. "I miss you," she said suddenly. "The man you were before the scandal that wounded you, before the silence, before you became a man who has everything and appears to possess nothing at all." My hands discreetly clenched. She saw, but she did not comment. "I did not come to wound Adrian, only to remind you that even when we hide, some eyes still see, and that certain women have the power to make even a duke reconsider where his freedom begins and where his fear ends." Before the weight of her words lingered too long, she raised her chin, and with a smile that blended provocation and tenderness, she launched, "By the way, neither of you is married yet. Do not tell me I will have to organize balls to find suitable suitors for the Blackmoors." Julian laughed, heartily. "If it is up to me, I hope to find someone with fewer obligations and more talent for rhymes, or gardening, or something useful at least. And who likes cats?" she completed wittily. "Or one who allows me to continue without having one." He winked. She turned to me then, her gaze sharp beneath her arched eyebrows. "And you, Adrian? Has no charming lady or young widowed baroness snagged you yet with a library and a suitable title?" "Charming libraries are not as common as they seem," I replied, with elegant coldness. "And titles are not sufficient currency for certain risks." Julian, now leaning back in the armchair, raised an eyebrow with contained humor. "Was that a no?" "That was a silence." Imogen laughed, but did not press. She merely leaned forward to adjust one of her gloves, and before leaving, looked at me with the same unexpected sweetness I had so often seen in Agatha. "By the way, Elena is even more fascinating than Aunt described." I raised an eyebrow. "Have you studied her so quickly then? Women recognize one another, brother, even when the world insists on disguising them. If it is not inconvenient," she continued, turning to her brothers naturally, "I would like Miss Marlowe to be my official lady's companion during my stay." Julian nodded with a slight lift of his eyebrow, and I said nothing. I merely inclined my chin slightly, like one consenting to something that, deep down, he had already decided within himself. She left, leaving in the air not only her discreet perfume of roses and black tea, but the unsettling feeling that this time she had come to stay.
The next day, the mansion seemed more alive, or perhaps more awake. There was a type of energy in the air, not frantic, but curious, as if the corridors heard old voices whispering new things. Lady Imogen occupied the spaces like one waking a sleeping place. Her presence was like contained music, not played loudly, but impossible to ignore. And I admired her. How could one not admire someone who looks into others with eyes that laugh? She had called me for tea. The newly arranged quarters were cozy, with floral fabrics in soft tones, fluttering curtains that filtered the light with tenderness. We talked about books, and she made me laugh by saying she preferred tragedies instead of comedies, because no one ever expects the truth to come with laughter, but it always slips through a tear, she had said with elegant irony. She told me about her departure to forget a rejection from a marquess for whom she had great affection. We spoke of the manor, renovations, an old project she and her aunt had discussed through letters. She lamented the lack of conclusion to so many ideas. And then came the silence. One of those silences that is not born from a lack of subject, but because of what is thought too much to be spoken. She offered me more tea, and, with her eyes turned towards the window, like one who lets a veil drop with a light gesture, she murmured, "You are not what you seem, Elena." I took a breath, but did not reply. Her eyes were still turned towards the landscape outside, but I knew she was observing me nonetheless. "I mean," she continued, now turning to me, "you dress like a servant, you walk like a lady, and you silence like a queen. Any one of those things would be admirable. The three together are intriguing." The cup felt a little heavy between my fingers, but I remained serene. "I had an uncommon education," I murmured, with a smile that was neither shy nor defensive. "Ah," she only said, like one gathering a detail to keep for later. After a brief sip of tea, she spoke in a lower tone, almost distracted. Most try to seem more than they are. You, curiously, seem to hide something more. I gave a slight smile, unsure whether to thank her or withdraw, but before I said anything, she added, not with intent, but with the lightness of one sharing a thought adrift. Adrian has always been constant, precise, like the time that governs his own house. Pause. There is an order in his gestures, in the way he breathes, in the way he responds. It is as if routine is the only ground where he can move without sinking. She played with the spoon, slowly stirring the tea in the cup. But yesterday, he was strange. There is something new in his eyes. I cannot define it, nor will I know if it was fatigue or something else. Just a different silence, as if he were trying to comprehend a storm he does not recognize. Her voice was gentle, without emphasis, but there was something there, an intertwining of invisible threads, that made my stomach clench for an instant. Sometimes, she murmured, it does not take an earthquake to disorder a man. It only takes something subtle to move him an inch from the ground. She raised her eyes to me, clear, tranquil. And my brother is a man who has never tolerated losing his footing. I remained silent. There was no accusation, nor undue curiosity, only a perception she tossed into the air, like one who casts seeds in the field and turns her face away not to see where they germinate. She smiled, finally, almost changing the subject. Thank you for the tea, Elena. I like conversing with women who know how to be silent with elegance. She knew, or she suspected, but she chose silence. For now. He is a good man, I whispered, as if speaking to myself. Yes, she replied with sweetness. The best of them, when he allows himself to be just a man. And then, she served me more tea, as if she had said nothing at all. It was late afternoon, and the sky over Rosewood Vale looked like a veil of gray satin draped over the rooftops of Ravenshire. The mansion quieted as one waiting for something, or someone. I was in the music room, cataloging antique sheet music at Lady Imogen's request, when I heard the steps. His steps. I did not need to look to know. It was as if the very wood recognized the weight of his presence, and the stained glass windows whispered the name I avoided pronouncing. He stopped at the door. He did not speak immediately. He merely watched me, and I pretended I was not trembling as I silently touched the piano keys. Miss Marlowe. The voice was low, but firm. I turned with a calm I did not feel. Your Grace. He entered. He closed the door behind him, and for an instant, it was just the two of us in a room too intimate for so many accumulated silences. He approached a few steps. Not many, but enough for my heart to recognize the proximity even before reason did. You like this room, he murmured, observing my hands still resting on the piano. Whenever I find you here, I have the impression that the music tries to keep pace with your breathing. My face warmed. He smiled slightly, an almost imperceptible smile, but one I had already learned to fear and desire. I must confess something, he continued, lowering his voice slightly. I have been coming here more often than I admit, not for the music, but for the hope of finding you like this. Serene, oblivious to the world, dangerously beautiful. My hands faltered over the keys. He inclined his head, in a gesture too gentle, too intimate for the distance we still pretended to keep. Tell me, he asked, with a warmth that crossed the space between us. Do you know what you do to me when you look at me that way? I did not answer. I could not. He took a deep breath, not like one trying to control himself, but like one trying to find courage. I want to give you something. And only then did I notice the small, antique velvet case in his hands. It was not just any gift. There was a weight in the way his fingers held it, like a fragment of who he was before he became a duke. It was my mother's, he said softly. She used it as a reliquary. He opened the case very slowly, like one revealing a piece of his own heart. Inside, two things rested: a dried rose, still delicate in its paleness, and a carefully folded sheet with verses written in faded ink. He touched the rose with reverence. She picked it in the winter garden, the day she knew my father had chosen her above all others. Then, he slid his fingers over the paper, and here, one of the poems she loved most. He extended the sheet for me to see, and there, In her elegant handwriting was transcribed a verse by Lord Byron, preserved with the devotion of one who guards a feeling and not an object. She walks in beauty, like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies. My hands trembled when I touched the paper. She said those lines described everything love could be, he murmured. Light and shadow, strength and delicacy, humility and courage. I raised my eyes to him. Why are you giving me this? He seemed to hold his breath, as if the answer was more fragile than the preserved rose itself. Because nothing in my life has been as true as what I feel when I see you. His voice dropped, almost a whisper. And because I want to know if there is any hope that you will allow me to love you as my mother was loved by my father. My heart stopped. The air became thick. Your Grace, I whispered, taking a step back. He did not advance. He did not ask for anything. He merely held my gaze. This is impossible. You know it. We both do. Impossible? His face was calm, but his voice carried the weight of a world collapsing. You are a duke, and I, a mere... I did not finish. He approached, slowly, but enough for me to feel the warmth of his presence envelop me like a silent vow. There is a path, Miss Marlowe, where the name I carry no longer defines me, he said in a low, yet firm voice, charged with something irreversible. My chest tightened. His gaze did not waver. There was intensity, a contained longing. What are you saying? I asked, in an almost trembling whisper. He took a step forward. The shadow from the window drew his silhouette, as if even the light wavered between duty and desire. I say that there are moments when the truth of the heart outweighs any coat of arms, and mine has long rested not in titles. It rests ardently in you. I confess that I want you in my life with my whole being, my hands instinctively intertwined. A defense, a shield. With all due respect, Your Grace, I fear I have misunderstood. There was a heavy silence for a few seconds. I stared at him. Please, tell me you are not insinuating that I should be a... The word burned inside me, but it did not cross my lips. My eyes welled up with tears, and I felt a slight tremor in my hands. My tone became colder than my soul desired, but there was fear, real fear. Please tell me you are not proposing that I occupy a hidden space, a concealed affection, a love without a name, a position without honor. He frowned, visibly overcome by something between perplexity and doubt, as if only then realizing my mistaken interpretation. The perplexity transfigured into a mask of offense, almost a pain drawn across his handsome face. You believe I want you as the secret of a weak man? That for a selfish desire I would ruin you? I did not answer. I felt the heat color my face. Shame. Absolute shame for having imagined for a second that he would propose. Something so immoral. I lowered my eyes, embarrassed. But he felt it. He touched my chin with tenderness, pulling my gaze up to him. Look at me, he said, with a pain he could not disguise. If I wanted you in silence, I would not bring you the most precious symbol of my mother's history. I do not offer shadows, Elena. I offer everything I have, including what I hold most dear, what the world thinks I would never abandon. Silence fell upon us like snow, soft, yet inexorable, and the world seemed to hold its breath. He extended his hand, and I touched it, not as one who accepts, but as one who, finally, ceases flight. His skin was warm against mine, and when he raised my fingers to his lips, there was no hurry, only an ancient and almost sacred gesture. He kissed each one of them with the precision of one who recognizes the value of what he did not dare to desire before. A shiver ran down my spine. He then wrapped me in his arms, not as one who takes, but as one who shelters. His embrace was strong, but there was tenderness in the weight with which he held me, as if by touching me he was forgiving himself for years of solitude. And yet, there was desire there, silent, intense, contained by honor, but impossible to disguise. I lay my world at your feet, he murmured against my ear, his voice rough, almost a plea. Do you trust me, my sweet Elena? And then, he whispered, not as a duke, but as a man who needed to know. Tell me, do your feelings correspond to mine? Is there love in your heart for me? The question came like an unexpected wind, simple, irreversible, and my heart answered before my lips could. My eyes sought his, and deep within that gaze, there was a man, not the duke, not the title, not the name etched in ancient coats of arms. Only him. And I. Only me. Yes, I whispered, my voice trembling like one with nowhere left to hide. There is love in me. For you. With all the strength I am capable of feeling. It was all I needed to say, because in that instant, he looked at me as if he had just returned to life. His lips met mine, not with urgency, but with affection and reverence, as if every touch said, "Thank you," and "It is not too late." A kiss without haste, a seal, deep, true, from a man who loved late, and from a woman who never thought she would be loved like this. And when he held me in his arms, again, there was no more war, there was no more doubt, only us, and that which no longer needed words to exist.
It was not a sleepless night. It was a night of certainty, the certainty that does not ask permission, and neither indulges in the luxury of regret. At dawn, I summoned Julian to the study. He entered with his coat thrown over his shoulders, his gaze carrying that infallible mixture of skepticism and compassion, his eyebrow arched, as he always did when he sensed that some definitive change was about to happen. "I need to speak with you," I said, already turning to the window. "You are speaking," he replied, dropping the coat onto the armchair. "The question is, are you ready to hear what you do not want to listen to?" I turned around. "I need you to hear me as a brother, but also as a man, as someone who, perhaps soon, will carry what was once mine." He sat down, slowly, like one who knows that what is coming will change everything. "Speak." I took a second before pronouncing it, because even unshakable decisions require courage to be said, aloud. "Take over the house, the name, the dukedom." Julian stared at me, with genuine astonishment, and with the strangeness of one who knows that this phrase, spoken by me, could only be real if it were irrevocable. His eyebrow arched slightly, like one tasting an old wine and already recognizing the flavor. He paused, and one corner of his mouth lifted in a cunning half-smile. "May I ask, what led you to such a dramatic decision?" I looked at him for an instant. I did not look away. "Elena," I replied, without hesitation. "She is the only thing in the world that makes me want to belong to what cannot be possessed." Julian lowered his eyes, smiled completely, and shook his head slightly, as one who had just confirmed a suspicion that already made him happy. "Ah, brother, so you have finally been touched by that which even a duke's title cannot contain. And what about you? What will you do?" His voice was clear of irony, just sober. "I will continue to be who I am, by name in the eyes of the crown, but from now on, you will be the public face of Ravenshire, the voice of the family, the pillar of the house. You will assume the responsibilities of the dukedom, all the duties, all the audiences, the administration of the lands, the commitments to Parliament, to the tenants, to the men who wear the Blackmoor coat of arms." Julian stepped closer. "But legally, you remain the Duke." "Yes, and until it becomes public, it will only be between us. This house will know, the servants will see, but Parliament will not be informed, yet. You are proposing a transition to me." I nodded. "Not an official resignation, but a passing of the torch. An act of responsibility, of truth, of love, Julian. Because I cannot continue wearing a title when my heart has already chosen another weight to carry. Do you understand what this means?" "I understand every detail, every consequence, and I still choose it." He lowered his eyes for a moment as one pondering not the decision, but the root of the person making it. "You were never given to impulse, Adrian, not even when the world collapsed upon you. Did you step down from the pedestal? Now you want to give it up, and voluntarily." "The pedestal does not give me peace, Julian. She does." He inhaled slowly, almost with pain, and spoke. "Aunt Agatha said before she left that one day the world would demand more from me than lightness, that I would have to carry weight. But I wonder, Adrian," Julian looked at me with a sudden sadness in his eyes, "and who is going to carry the weight of seeing you renounce everything for love? Someone needs to choose what is true, Julian, even if it hurts." Julian stood up, walked to the bookshelf, touched a random spine, not out of interest, but out of habit. Then he turned back. "What if she is more than she seems, Adrian? What if she is not a simple woman without a surname, but someone whose story has not yet been told? We do not know much about her past." My answer came firm, without hesitation. "Then I will have chosen correctly. not because of her name, but because of who she is in essence, and for what she has made of me and in me. I know she had a simple and disciplined life, but she is clean, without scandals or stains. That is enough for me." He looked at me for another instant. Then he smiled, but there was a shadow in the smile. "You were always the strong one, the immovable one, the castle. But perhaps Aunt Agatha was right." His tone softened. "Perhaps ruin truly is the only ground where life can be born for you." The phrase hit me like a serene arrow. "I will do what is necessary," he completed, placing his hand on my shoulder firmly. "But until it is official," he added, with a more practical gleam in his eyes, "no one will know, not the crown, not Parliament. You are still the Duke, Adrian, until the moment she says the final yes, with everything that implies." I nodded, with the weight of a world I was, at last, willing to let go of, for her, but with a heart full of the only thing I could never buy, hope.
The sun was beginning to say goodbye, and the winter sky seemed embroidered in pale satin. The dry leaves danced lightly between the silent corridors of Ravenshire, and a servant led me in silence to the side garden of the greenhouse. It was a place secluded from the house, a refuge that Lady Agatha loved, and that, according to Imogen, Adrian never let anyone touch. As I approached, I saw him with his back turned, standing, motionless before an old climbing white rose that, even in all the cold, stubbornly insisted on blooming. Hearing me, he turned around. For an instant, he just looked at me, as if the world paused between us. "When I was a boy," he said, walking towards me with steady steps, "I used to come here when everything around me seemed about to collapse." He smiled with one corner of his lips. I never knew why, but this was the only place where I could breathe. He stopped before me, and now, here I am, before the only woman who taught me what it truly means to want to live. He took a small blue velvet case from his pocket. Inside it, a silver ring. Simple, without stones, but with his mother's initials engraved inside, and a date, marked by the love that founded a story. He knelt, there, in the earth that once consoled him, now, in voluntary surrender. "There is no greater nobility than loving someone before knowing who she is," he said, his voice firm, yet touched with emotion. "And there is no greater honor than building a future with her, even if it costs the name I inherited." I brought my hand to my mouth, and for a moment, I did not breathe. "You would give up the title?" My voice came out almost soundless. He raised his eyes to me, and in them, there was no doubt. "Yes, because all the weight of being your grace does not compare to the weight of not having you with me. And if one day you regret it, it was not a provocation, it was a real fear." An orphaned girl still lived inside me, but he smiled, softly. "What I regret is the time I lost trying not to love you." My soul faltered, and my knees did too. I fell before him, without shame, without a shield, just me. He held my hands between his, and there was a slight tremor there, not of fear, but of something rarer in the strong hope. My eyes welled up, not with doubts, but with a love so full it barely fit in my body. That plea, so noble, so bare, it was the most beautiful of vows, and the only possible answer was this. "Yes, Adrian." My voice came out low, but clear. "Yes, because your pain touched mine, because your love calls me by the name I did not even know I had, and because in your embrace, I recognize myself." He closed his eyes for an instant, like one receiving a long-implored relief, and there, between the scent of the cold earth, rose bushes, and the eternity of that instant, two hearts finally belonged to each other. And with a kiss of love, we sealed our destiny. The smaller parlor in the south wing was more brightly lit than I remembered, not by candles or windows, but by the smiles contained within. Imogen and Julian had met us in the garden at dusk, and when we returned, everyone seemed to understand that something had changed. The atmosphere of the house, the glances between the servants, Joan's almost reverent silence while folding the shawls, everything seemed to incline slightly toward us, as if the house breathed a sigh of relief, finally witnessing something being born within its walls, even if not yet officially disclosed. "So, it's official?" Imogen asked with a gleam in her eyes, settling lightly onto the chaise, while sipping the tea previously served by Joan's hands. If he hasn't yet asked you to commission a wedding dress, then this house is slower than I thought, Julian teased, casting an amused look at Adrian. The Duke, who remained, standing by the fireplace, smiled only with his eyes. But that was enough. It is official, I whispered, blushing more than I would have liked. Imogen clapped her hands softly, like a girl who finds a lost toy, and Julian raised his glass, toasting silently with his irreverent, complicit manner. It was then that the sound of firm footsteps cut through the moment. The butler entered, a letter in hand. "Forgive the interruption, Your Grace. Miss Marlowe, this correspondence arrived a few minutes ago. It was delivered by a messenger from the main road. He said it was urgent." My heart tightened slightly. I did not receive letters often. In fact, almost never. I took the envelope, the seal still intact. The coat of arms was unfamiliar to me, but the name of the sender made my hands tremble. The name rarely mentioned by Miss Hathaway. I clutched my brooch tightly, as one trying to grasp security in the face of unexpected chaos, as if somehow I could anchor myself before the abyss opening beneath my feet. Julian noticed my sudden pallor. Imogen immediately stood up. "Miss Elena?" But I did not hear, or perhaps I could not react. Adrian approached me, looking concerned. I broke the seal. I read the first lines, and that was enough. The world tilted. The letter fell from my hands like a piece of history ripped from time. My legs gave way, and I only avoided falling to the floor because his arms, always his arms, reached me first. "Sit here," he said gently, guiding me to the nearby armchair. The maid Joan, who was entering the room carrying a new tray with sugared biscuits, looked at me with wide eyes upon seeing my paleness. "She needs air. I will fetch lavender water and lemon balm tea. I will be right back." "Thank you," Adrian said with a firm nod, without taking his eyes off me. He then bent down and picked up the envelope from the floor. He looked up with contained hesitation and extended it back to me. "Can you tell me what this is about?" My eyes swept over the first line of the letter again, and that was all I could read. "It is not possible," I murmured. My voice choked. He knelt in front of me. "May I?" he asked, seeking permission with his eyes before opening the paper. I nodded, unable to form words. He read, in silence. The lines were few, but they were enough to change everything. When he finished, he looked at the paper again, as if he needed to confirm what he had read. "That name," he said slowly, with a controlled weight in his voice. "Edmund Ashley. Does it mean anything to you?" My throat dried up. I swallowed in silence. And then, I murmured, "Miss Hathaway, the woman who raised me, mentioned him sometimes, almost like a prayer, but only when she thought I was asleep." He observed her in silence for an instant. "What do you know about your origins?" "Only that I was left as a baby in the care of Miss Hathaway, a kind-hearted governess. My mother died in childbirth. I never knew my father. He died before I could remember him. That is what I was told all my life." Adrian closed the letter with a contained movement, and his expression changed. "If he is who I think he is," he paused, "this could change everything you know about yourself." Then he stood up. He turned to Julian, his tone sober and leaving no room for objection. "Ask the stable hands to prepare a carriage, comfortable, but without the ducal coat of arms. The moment requires discretion. I do not want to attract unnecessary attention. And call a discreet maid to accompany us, to maintain decorum." Julian rose. "Where to?" "Briar Hollow. Today." He returned to me, knelt again. His fingers sought mine, with firm tenderness. "Elena, it is all right. You will not go alone." His voice was low, but it carried the world. "Whatever this letter contains, we will face it, together, as it should be, as I promised." Joan returned with the calming infusion, her eyes teary, but still not understanding the gravity of what was happening. None of the servants knew, yet, that I was the woman the Duke had asked to marry moments before. But as he supported me, as one protecting what cannot be lost, a single certainty pierced me entirely. The name on that letter, that name I had grown up believing was buried with my childhood, had returned, and with it, a past hidden beneath years of silence would come, a secret that, upon being revealed, would change everything, for him, for me, for us.
The coat of arms was old, worn by time but not erased. Engraved in iron on the entrance gate pillars, Against a background darkened by moss, it still displayed the heraldry of the Ashleys of Livingston, 3 roses crossed by a sword. The carriage slowed between the tall pine trees lining the road, their branches heavy with snow forming a silent archway above us. It was a place I knew by name, but never expected to visit under those circumstances. Briar Hollow. It was not a simple, rural property. It was a noble stronghold, silent in its decay, and by all indications, a cradle of forgotten truths. Elena, seated across from me, next to the young and discreet maid, kept her gaze fixed on the window. Her hands intertwined in her lap, trembled slightly, but she did not say a word. Her silence was heavier than winter. Upon stepping out of the carriage, we were greeted by an elderly butler, whose posture still betrayed the rigors of tradition. "Your Grace." "Miss," he said with a brief bow, "the Earl awaits you." There were no whispers, no surprise, just the silent weight of a house where time had stopped and waited for witnesses to its last secret. The maid was gently led by the housekeeper to the kitchen, to warm herself by the fire. Elena and I followed the butler's steps. The interior of the manor was dimmed by the half-open curtains, as if the light was unwelcome there. The aroma of old lavender mixed with that of polished furniture and old papers. The silence was as dense as the sheets covering some of the ancestral furniture. We climbed a spiral staircase, and it was there, on the landing of the first floor, that my body stopped. A portrait. Above the stone fireplace, illuminated by the oblique beam of light piercing the tall window, was the portrait of a middle-aged man with aristocratic features and dark eyes that, even in paint, conveyed authority and pain. It was him, Edmund Ashley, the Earl of Livingston. I had met him years before at a diplomatic reception in London. He had a solid but isolated name, a nobleman who withdrew from public life after his wife's death, and without heirs, or so it was said in the discreet aristocratic circles. In that moment, looking into the eyes in the painting, I understood. That man was Elena's father. I did not say a word. Not there. Not yet. I followed the butler without looking at her. Every step was a confirmation. Every breath a preparation. "The Earl will receive you now," the butler announced, opening a richly carved oak door. Inside, a room bathed in shadows rested in silence. The curtains were half closed, the fireplace crackled softly, and the Earl lay in a reclining armchair by the window, wrapped in heavy blankets and an expression that was half suffering, half relief. The butler announced our names with due formality. "Your Grace, the Duke of Ravenshire, and Miss Elena Marlowe." Yum. Earl raised his chin slightly upon hearing her name, but when he looked at me, he hesitated, and then, in a low, hoarse voice, he said, "Come in, please, both of you. I prefer to wait outside, if it is not inconvenient. I believe you need a moment alone to talk," I murmured with a respectful nod. He raised his hand with effort. "No, stay, please. There is much to say, and destiny saw fit that you should be here as a witness, so you must also hear, Your Grace." Pointed to an armchair to the left of the fireplace, and I settled there. Elena advanced in silence like a delicate shadow. She did not know yet, but everything would soon change, and now I knew. I knew that the woman who had conquered my heart was, by right and blood said a lady, the legitimate daughter of an earl.
The room was silent, warmed only by the trembling light of the fireplace, and the faint sound of the breathing of a man who seemed to carry the weight of many lives. He was seated in a large armchair, near the half-open window, wrapped in thick blankets. A shawl rested upon his shoulders, as if it were an armor against time, or against guilt. I did not dare call him by any name, neither father nor lord. I merely approached, as one approaches an ancient altar, with reverence, but, unsure whether to pray or flee, he raised his eyes with effort, and when our gazes met, his body trembled as if struck by an embodied memory. The voice that emerged from him was hoarse, weak, but charged with an emotion that is not spoken, only felt. "I waited for you, Elena." My heart skipped a beat. "I waited too long to call you this, daughter." The world spun, but I did not move. The word remained suspended in the air between us like a sentence, a promise, a belated confession. He tried to rise, but a moan escaped. Instinctively, I moved forward and held his hand. "Please, do not move." His gaze swept over my face with disconcerting tenderness, like one searching in another's features for something he had lost. You are her reflection, the same delicacy in the features, the same light in the eyes. My God, he closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. Your mother was the great love of my life. Losing her was the most terrible blow of fate. It devastated my existence. I was never the man I was before her. Elena stared at the Earl, sensing the pain and sadness in his eyes. Miss Hathaway told me my mother died after childbirth, I murmured. My voice choked. He nodded slowly. Yes, she died in my arms. So young, beautiful as ever. And yet she smiled, as if, by giving you to life, she had fulfilled her mission. She was so happy with your arrival. A pause, long, painful. But he swallowed hard. I was weak, Elena. I looked at you, so small, and all I could see was her absence. Looking at you was a constant reminder of what was taken from me. I was weak, selfish, a rag of a man dressed in nobility. I buried myself in sadness, and then in vices that little by little undermined who I was and almost all the wealth I once possessed, bringing me to this sad state I am in now. A few days after you were born, I entrusted you to the care of Mrs. Hathaway, the most worthy woman I knew, and asked her to raise you discreetly, with all the dignity and education of a lady, far from the weight of my grief. I ensured everything financially, so that you would lack nothing, except the essential. And the essential was you, I whispered, unable to hold back the tears. The love and presence of my father. He raised his wrinkled hand to his face, and a tear slid, silent, to the tip of his chin. I should have been your father, but I was only a hidden name in a silence that was too heavy, and every year away from you was a sentence I imposed on myself. I closed my eyes, squeezing his hand, and for the first time, I heard, from his mouth, the name that had always been absent from my story, Edmund Ashley, Earl of Livingston, and your father, Elena, your father, however cowardly and unworthy I may have been. The room became motionless. Not even the fire dared to crackle, and in my chest, a girl, long forgotten, wept for the father she never had, and for the one who, now, pleaded for forgiveness. The tears came, hot, uncontrollable, but I stayed there. I abandoned you. I robbed you of the right to be a daughter. I robbed your history, your rights as a lady, your name, my embrace, protection, and paternal comfort that were due to you. But every time I thought of looking for you, I felt I did not deserve it, that I could not face the great wrong I had done. I grew up thinking I was an orphan, someone without origin and without a past, alone in the world. Can you measure the sadness of that? I murmured, no longer able to hold back the tears. I grew up thinking I was an orphan, someone without origin, without history, without roots in this world. I murmured, my voice breaking like thin glass. Can you measure the sadness of that? The feeling of not belonging anywhere? He closed his eyes for an instant, as if every word of mine pierced his chest, and when he spoke, his voice was no longer that of an earl, but that of a man begging for life to grant him one last forgiveness. I beg you, forgive me. This was the greatest mistake of my existence, the regret that consumes me every minute of these miserable days. Forgive me, Elena. I do not wish to leave this world carrying the weight of what I denied you. And then, upon opening his eyes again, something in them changed. It was not just pain. It was recognition. It was memory. His gaze descended slowly to my lap, pausing on the brooch fastened to my dress, the one that for so many years had been my only treasure, without my knowing why. His trembling hand rose, not touching, just pointing to the piece with a reverent gesture. That brooch, he whispered, like one finding a lost fragment of his own soul. It was hers. The silence that followed was not empty. It was sacred. Antique gold, jade in the center, and the silver. Rose, the emblem of the Ashleys. He paused, a painful smile softening his marked features. Our heraldry has 3 roses crossed by a sword, the beauty that resists, the courage that guards, the delicacy that wounds time and still blooms. This delicate brooch, with a single rose, was specially made for the women of our house. He inhaled with effort, and his tear-filled eyes settled on mine again. When I saw you enter, With that brooch over your heart, I simply confirmed who you were even before my lips dared to call you daughter, because that piece belonged to the Countesses of Livingston for generations. A deep emotion vibrated in his voice, and it never shone as brightly as it shines on you now. I looked at the precious jewel that Miss Hathaway had given me when I turned 15, saying only, "This is part of your history. One day, you will understand. You are my only legitimate heir. There is no one else." I never allowed myself to form a new family, to have heirs. Everything I am, everything I was, is yours, by right. But more than that, he inhaled deeply, already with difficulty. I need you to know that I regret it, with every breath, for every year stolen from you, for not having held your hand and welcomed you when you most needed a father. The pain crossed my chest like a sudden blow. And yet, what I felt was not anger. It was loss. A painful, devastating loss. It was love. Delayed, but still love. "I forgive you," I murmured, "not for everything that was, but for everything we can still be, while there is time." He smiled, and a tear rolled down from his eyes without resistance. Adrian remained motionless in the armchair, in silence, but I sensed that he was breathing with more difficulty than the Earl. His eyes were fixed on me, on my gestures, on the voluntary and sincere act of forgiveness that I granted without reservation, on that which made us human, despite all the terrible scars. In that room, in that house forgotten by God and time, my father, the Earl, had finally called me by name with the weight of truth, and for the first time, I knew who I was. I finally embraced my father, and we wept.
The room was quiet, except for the crackling of the fireplace and the Earl's labored breathing. Elena had withdrawn for a moment, invited by the housekeeper to have a cup of chamomile and lemon balm tea to calm herself, leaving me alone with the Earl for the first time since we arrived at that time-slumbering house. I sat in the other armchair by the window, observing the old portraits, the frayed tapestries, the books that still resisted on the shelves. A place that was once majestic, and now awaited the departure of its last guardian. The Earl looked at me with effort, his countenance calmer, as if the simple fact of having seen her had placated a pain he had carried for decades. "Your Grace personally brought her to me," he said finally. His voice was low but clear, without truly knowing her, without knowing the name she carried. But still, you protected her, and honored us with your presence. How did you find her in my house? He smiled a sad and tired smile. I always kept her one step from my sight, young man. I longed to see her, yet never had the courage to approach. I knew when she left for your house. Somehow, knowing she was under such a distinguished roof, even if austere, was a comfort. Even if in a position inconsistent with her nobility. I inhaled deeply. There was something that needed to be said, something that, until that moment, belonged only to our history, mine and Elena's. She came to me with excellent recommendations to serve as companion to my aunt, and quietly, she became the spark that lit the light where I only knew darkness. I began, my voice low but firm. It was as if, for the first time in many years, someone opened the windows of a house I believed condemned to silence. I leaned slightly forward, not as a duke before an earl, but as one man before another, a man transformed by love. I give you my word of honor. Your daughter was treated with dignity, respect and appreciation in every hall of Ravenshire, but I must confess something that perhaps no father expects to hear from a man with my title. I took a deep breath. I became fond of Elena in a way that never happened to me, for the sweetness that does not demand, for the quiet strength that does not impose, for the silence that speaks louder than any court. She accepted my hand, believing she had no name, believing she was just an orphan before a duke. Even so, she trusted me. The Earl's eyes wavered, not in reproach but in reverent astonishment. I continued, "Now that the truth has come to light, now that I know who she is and from what blood she descends, it is my duty, as a man and as a nobleman, to ask you for what my heart had already decided." I stood up with the posture the occasion demanded, and before his bedside I announced, "I am Lord Adrian Blackmoor, Duke of Ravenshire. I formally ask for the hand of your daughter, Lady Elena. Ashley in marriage, Not for convenience, not for position, but for love, for honor, for respect. I allowed a moment of silence to rest between us. Then I added, and with the irrevocable promise that she will never know lack of protection, of admiration, or of freedom at my side. She will be loved with everything I am, and more. The old Earl brought his hand to his chest. For a moment I feared the emotions were too strong for the exhausted body that remained of him. But then he smiled, a sad smile and immensely grateful. Life was kinder to me than I dared to hope. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and murmured, "She was the guilt I carried because I rejected the girl who was my gift from heaven, but she will be your miracle, my young man." He called the butler with a weakened gesture. The man, silver-haired and impeccably poised, approached with a dark wooden box in his hands. "I want to hand over the official documents of filiation to you. The testament long kept under lock and key will ensure that she will inherit everything that still remains to me. The name, the coat of arms, the lands." The butler inclined his head, and as he passed the box to me with reverence, he added in a low voice, "These are the official documents that confirm her lineage, the baptismal record, signed by the parish vicar and the Earl himself, her parents' marriage certificate, and the declaration of filiation, sealed, with the Livingston coat of arms, prepared years ago for the day it became necessary to make it public. Now they will be presented to the Lords of Registry and annexed to the ministry's archives." I nodded slightly. Elena had been at the door for a few minutes, in silence, and in that moment, seeing her father's eyes, she understood. "It is your right, daughter, and my final request, that the world may see you at last, as is your due." She approached slowly and gently squeezed his hand. He looked at her as one whose soul is no longer burdened, and he blessed our union with a tired but satisfied smile. That night, as one who finally fulfilled his last promise to love and guilt, the Earl Edmund Ashley closed his eyes and left the world of the living. The funeral 2 days later was discreet, dignified, and silent. Eleanor wept with the serenity only the strong know. I kept her in my arms, and no curious gaze dared to cross ours. There, on the same day, she was daughter and orphan, but also my fiancé, and I, who arrived there as the man who loved a woman without a name, left by the side of the only lady my heart would ever dare to forget, Lady Eleanor Ashley, daughter of the Earl of Livingston, legitimate heir to the Ashley blood and legacy, the woman who, even without a title, carried a nobility that no crown could bestow, my future wife, and the most unexpected miracle of my life.
The road back felt different, and in a way, it was, because I was no longer the same woman who had left a few days before. In my satchel, the documents that legitimized my name. In my heart, an emotion that could not be put into words. Belonging. But what truly transformed me was not written on sealed papers. It was in his hand over mine, in the way Adrian's eyes sought mine with reverence, as one who saw there, not a lady, but the woman for whom he had decided to give up the world, and, by an irony of fate, had gained it back. The carriage slowed, and even before the servants emerged at the entrance, the main door opened. Adrian descended first. Then, he offered me his hand with a silent bow. Joan smiled at me with tear-filled eyes, and even without yet knowing the full dimension of everything, she understood. Her embrace was that of someone who had waited a lifetime to see justice happen, in the form of love. From the joyful looks of her and the servants, I realized that the news of my impending marriage had already been shared with everyone, although the greater secret was yet to be revealed. "Gentlemen," Adrian announced, with his grave, unembellished voice, as Julian and Imogen approached. "Allow me to introduce Lady Elena Ashley, legitimate daughter of Edmund Ashley, the Earl of Livingston, and, in a short time, my wife." The world seemed to hold its breath for an instant. Lord Julian blinked, dumbfounded, only for a second. Then a wide smile spread across his lips, followed by a noble nod and a kiss to my hand, like one greeting a lady before the court. Lady Imogen, for her part, froze with the air of someone who had entertained a suspicion, and now saw that suspicion take form before her eyes. "Well, so my intuition was impeccable after all," she said, with a theatrical gleam in her eyes, before opening her arms and bowing with an exaggerated and charming reverence. "Milady," she announced, full of grace, "you are officially forbidden to fold the pieces of your own trousseau. But I grant you the right to opine on the laces. I laughed. For the first time in days, I laughed like someone who knew to whom she belonged, and where she was. Imogen linked her arm through mine naturally, as if she had always done so, and guided me down one of the side corridors. Not toward my former companion's chambers, but to a new wing, where the room had been specially prepared to receive, as she herself had said, the future mistress of Ravenshire. Joan and the housekeeper helped me prepare everything, she said, as she pushed the door open lightly. Soft colors, fresh flowers, newly bound books, and new cushions, with more comfort, for your new beginning, worthy of a new history. And indeed, it was. The room had the warmth of things made with affection. There was lavender in the jars, hand-embroidered cushions, and satin ribbons resting on the bedspread. In the center of the beautiful four-poster bed, open boxes with fabrics, ribbons, pearls sewn onto white and light blue silk. "You look happy, Imogen," I murmured, touching a delicate mother-of-pearl embroidery. "I am," she replied, sitting on the edge of the bed, "but not the kind of happiness that shouts. I am peaceful, in a way that no longer allows me to pretend I don't feel. We are leaving the past behind to live new joys. You and Adrian show me how possible that is." There was a brief but dense pause. A shadow of pain is still here, but now it has company. "What?" She looked at her hands and smiled, not at me, but at what she felt. Hope. We remained in silence. One of those silences that do not demand to be filled, only shared. And in that instant, I realized that the house, once the stage for so many shadows, was now opening its doors to something new, not just for me, but for all of us. The living room was warmer that evening, not because of the crackling fireplace, but because of the light feeling that seemed to circulate between the walls, as if something previously dormant was finally breathing again. There was tea served, brandy in the crystal glasses, and small laughs escaping through the corridors, like birds newly freed after a long winter. When Adrian and I entered, we found Julian leaning in an armchair, a glass of brandy in his right hand, and a rolled-up paper in his left, displaying the theatrical air of someone about to announce a royal decree, or an especially calculated prank. He raised the paper with exaggerated solemnity. "It's official," he announced, like one proclaiming the birth of a star. "The marriage license has been approved. In 2 weeks we will have a new duchess." Adrian arched an eyebrow, with that elegant irony that made his countenance look less frozen than it used to be. Interesting choice of words. I thought we had resolved that point. "Oh yes," Julian said, leaning back and pretending to swirl the drink with the seriousness of a judge. "About that." He raised the glass, cleared his throat, and declared, with theatricality, "I, Lord Julian Blackmoor, formally refuse to assume any responsibility for this manor, for the dukedom, and especially for the endless paperwork that accompanies it." Imogen laughed even before he concluded the toast. "He is the most sensible man in this family," she said, crossing her legs with charm. Julian completed, raising his glass. "This house is still yours, dear brother, as is the entire weight of the title, and now it has its duchess." The laughter spread, light, tender, as if the house itself recognized the need for that relief. Even the ever-sober butler had to turn his face to hide a smile. Adrian let out a low laugh, a genuine laugh, profoundly his own, and one that seemed so rare that Julian almost let the brandy slip from his hand. "Good luck giving up on me, Julian," Adrian provoked, crossing his arms with reluctant humor. "Do you really think I would have the courage to leave Ravenshire in your hands?" Julian put his hand to his chest, playfully offended. "Well, you could at least pretend that concerned you minimally." "It did concern me," Adrian said, moving closer and lightly patting his brother's shoulder. "To imagine you overseeing accounts, waking up at 5 in the morning and attending. Desperate tenants would be cruelty. Cruelty would be Parliament dealing with me," Julian corrected, eliciting another round of laughter. "But I must admit, seeing you smile again, Adrian, that is the true change in this house." He cast a sidelong glance at his brother, but the expression carried genuine joy. Julian then turned to me, with a gallant bow. "Lady Elena, accept my congratulations, and my apologies in advance, because now we will discover together how to live, with a transformed Duke. This house had not seen my brother smile like this since I was young enough to believe he had a heart. Just look. The miracle finally happened. Imogen nodded in approval. It's true. He used to look like he was sculpted in permanent ice. She smiled sideways and winked at me. Behold, my dear, you brought the thaw. Julian completed, amused. Ravenshire is warmer, more alive. Even the corridors seem to have woken up. Who would have thought that all it took was a certain lady to return our Duke to the natural state of a man who still knows how to laugh? Adrian shook his head, feigning disapproval, but the lightness in his eyes betrayed him. He was a different man there, freer, more present, more alive. That went through my heart, like a warm breath. Imogen sighed, looking up, as one seeking a dear memory in the shadows of the ceiling. Aunt Agatha would have loved to see this, Julian added with sudden gentleness. She always said that Ravenshire would only be complete when there was enough love to warm even the stone walls. Adrian closed his eyes for an instant, a brief smile touched by longing softening his posture. She would be happy, Imogen murmured. She is. I feel it. A sweet silence descended for an instant. Not the kind that weighs, but the kind that envelops, as if an ancient, gentle, and warm presence touched each of us with its fingertips. Then Adrian turned to me, not as a Duke, not as a legend, but as the man whose heart was already united with mine. He crossed the drawing room and extended his hand. I took it with everything I was. You chose me when I was no one, I murmured. Now I am Lady Ashley, but my favorite name is still Elena, when said by you. He brought my hand to his lips with a tenderness that seemed to interrupt even the world's breath around us. He kissed it before everyone, not out of duty, but out of devotion. And in that instant, I understood. Neither the titles, nor the halls, nor the coats of arms. Nothing defined who I was, because now I was his, and he mine, and that was nobility. The sky dawned in gold, and for an instant I wanted to believe that this was not just light, but a blessing, as if time itself had paused at the gates of Ravenshire just to witness that day. There were no crowds, no pompous processions crossing aristocratic halls. There were no headlines or endless balls with unknown partners. There was only the essential, those who saw my pain, and now witnessed the subtle miracle of my flourishing. The ceremony was outdoors, under the great olive tree in the inner garden, the tree under which Lady Agatha used to have tea on afternoons of discreet sunshine. It was Imogen who chose it, with a gentle smile and tear-filled eyes, because it is a tree of peace, she had said, touching the trunk with reverence, and because everything sacred needs to have roots. When I walked to the simple altar, flanked by benches covered in white linen and flowers from the garden itself, I did not tremble, not from lack of emotion, but because every step was an answer. Every beat of my heart knew that the time for the harvest had arrived. After so much waiting, so much absence, my dress was beautiful, but without great pomp. Light silk, long sleeves of fine lace, discreetly fitted. The veil was short, held by an antique pearl clasp that had belonged to Miss Hathaway, a gesture of silent gratitude to the one who taught me how to be, even without a name. In my hair, orange blossoms. In my eyes, the memory of everything I faced. On my lips, the taste of a name I had learned to love since the first time it was denied to me. Adrian. He was there, awaiting me. Adrian wore a cleanly cut, unadorned frock coat, with a white rose on his lapel. And that gaze, the same one that had burned me in the library, that had wounded me in the garden, that had healed me with a kiss under the snow. Now, before me, he was just a man, whole, surrendered. The moment arrived like a whisper. We had exchanged glances, silent promises, and brief touches throughout the ceremony. But when the officiant signaled, and he turned to me, I saw the man who loved me in secret, who desired me in silence, who fought against internal torments, against his own name, and conquered his own fear, all for me. Adrian took my hand in his, and with a firm yet serene voice, he spoke the words that would forever seal what was already ours. With all that I possess, I honor you. With my means, I endow you. With my body, I worship you. And with my name, I receive you. In light and in shadow, in absence and in sight. And before God and men, I take you, Elena, for my wife. The words were not just vows. They were an intimate sacrament, a public confession of a love that was already born eternal, even before. We knew it. I closed my eyes for an instant, and when I opened them, I realized I was crying, not out of fear, but from knowing that, finally, I belonged. To him, to the home we built in the ruins of solitude. Lord Julian also blessed us with a choked voice, not as the priest present, nor as a ceremonial figure, but as a brother, as a witness, as someone who knew, better than anyone, what we had overcome to be there. Joan wept softly, her handkerchief damp between her fingers, watching from afar, and Imogen, my late ray of sunshine, placed a necklace around my neck with steady hands. Gold, aquamarine, and the light perfume of someone who is now my sister. So that you never forget, she murmured, that you are now part of all this, and we are part of you. I squeezed her hand with moist eyes, but without allowing the tear to escape. The moment was not for pain. It was for the silent glory that comes after mourning. The kiss that sealed our union was not long, nor indecent, but it was everything. It was root. It was a covenant. It was love dressed as a promise. And feeling my Adrian's arms wrap around me, amidst the contained applause of those who knew, I knew. The man who once looked at me with apparent disdain was now the one holding me like someone who rediscovers his own salvation. And I, the woman who once did not even have a surname, now was his wife, his Elena, his Duchess.
The door closed behind us with a soft whisper, as if the entire house and the old witness to my silences was finally resting. The candlelight flickered on the stone walls, illuminating the ducal bedroom with a warm glow that made everything more human, more alive, more ours. And she was there, Elena, in the center of that ducal bedroom that for so many years was just an extension of my loneliness. She appeared as a reminder of everything life could still offer, her hair falling over her shoulders, the beautiful dress that carried the scent of garden flowers. But none of this struck me as powerfully as her eyes, the eyes that at last belonged to me. I took a few steps, feeling the usual weight of my name dissolve with every inch that brought us closer. It was strange and liberating to feel my shoulders relax as I watched her smile, even slightly, as if that space was meant for her all along. I inhaled the scent of her hair slowly, so fragrant. "Eleanor," I murmured, allowing my voice to carry the truth I had hidden for so long. I spent years believing I deserved only silence, the coldness of duty, the burden of a title that kept me whole and shattered me at the same time. I touched her face. The warm skin under my fingers made me understand that this night was not a ritual. It was redemption. "But then you came," I continued lower, "and offered me something I cannot even name. You did not give me back to the world. Elena, you gave me back to myself." The light in her eyes trembled, not from hesitation but from feeling, a feeling I always feared I would not know how to recognize. I brought my face close to hers, feeling Elena's breath touch my skin like a promise. "I am a man of discipline, of control. I always have been, and after the dishonor I suffered in the past, I closed myself off even more. But before you," I gave a slight smile, small, sincere, almost shy, so rare that even I found it strange. "I find no defense whatsoever." She held my hands and her touch pierced me like a silent blessing. "If there is something in me, something you fear, ask. I give it. If there is something in you that needs protection, say it. I will guard it. If there is a dream of yours that seems too far away, I swear, Elena, I will reach it." She touched my chest, right over my heart, and I felt the world quiet down in that gesture. "Adrian, I grew up deprived of so many things. I never imagined being loved like this. Loved." The word struck me with the softness of thunder. I smiled, truly smiled, letting her see the man I rarely let the world know. "There is no merit of mine in it," I confessed. "You are the very poetry I always feared to recite." I kissed her temple with the devotion of one touching something sacred. "And if there is one fear I carry this night," I murmured, "it is only that of failing you. With the woman who gave me back to life." She pulled me closer by the nape of the neck with a courage that completely disarmed me. "You will not fail," she whispered, "because I trust you." For an instant, I closed my eyes. When I opened them, all that was in them was gratitude and love, a deep, tranquil, ancestral love, the kind of feeling that is not born of desire, but of destiny. Our lips met, a slow kiss, deep, charged with the silent devotion we had carried for each other for so long. She trembled in my arms, and I supported her, as I always knew I would. "My Elena," I said between kisses, my voice warmed by the feeling I could no longer conceal. "You were the longest wait of my life." We brought our faces close, so near that the warmth of her skin touched mine, creating a suspended instant made only of the two of us. "And now?" she asked, in a breath of tenderness that seemed to envelop the entire room. The smile I gave then was almost reverent. "Now," I replied, brushing my lips against hers, "I love you as a man loves what he knows to be eternal." The fireplace crackled, the soft scent of lavender filled the air, the candles flickered as if blessing us, and then came more kisses, on her face, on her mouth, on the smooth line of her jaw, kisses that spoke of tenderness, of admiration, of deep affection, kisses that promised more than any vow. She slid her hands to my face, molding it with a tenderness that made me hold my breath. "Adrian," she whispered, as if my name were a whisper of surrender, and I kissed her again, and again, and again. The room seemed to dissolve around us, leaving only the warm light, the heat of her body against mine, and the feeling that enveloped us like a silent promise. The night enveloped us slowly like a veil. The lights became soft, the shadows complicit, and what followed belonged only to us, to me, to her, to the love that night.
The first months as Duchess at Ravenshire Hall passed like a season that does not announce itself, but simply blossoms. I discovered that being a duchess did not mean possessing halls, jewels, or privileges, but understanding the human value behind every gesture, every custom, every name that depended on my voice. And my voice, once so small, now found its place. I learned to identify documents, recognize seals, respond to letters from ladies seeking assistance, from tenants asking for guidance, from neighbors complaining about bad weather and harvests. Joan said I was born for this house, and Imogen, laughing while mending my frustrated attempts to fold aristocratic handkerchiefs, added, "Born for it, and for our glacial Duke, who was never the same again." And it was true. Adrian, once so contained, now walked the corridors with a kind of new calm. It was not lightness. Dukes are rarely light, but a peace that drained the hardness from his shoulders. I watched him work with renewed dedication, immersing himself in management papers with a vigor that almost moved me. He did not serve the title out of vanity or tradition, but because he recognized, in duty, a silent way to protect us all. Sometimes I would observe him from afar, leaning over his desk, his brow slightly furrowed, his shirt sleeves rolled up on his forearms. And I would be surprised to realize that this man, so powerful, so admired, so burdened with responsibilities, would turn his gaze to me as soon as he sensed my presence, and he would smile. I would never get used to that smile. One afternoon, in the lower garden, while Imogen was trying, with theatrical frustration, to teach me how to prune rose bushes without looking like a botanical criminal, I heard footsteps behind us. A single exchanged look between her and me was enough for Imogen to murmur, "Your Duke is coming. Pretend I know what I'm doing with these shears." And she fled, laughing, before he arrived. Adrian approached from behind me, and just his shadow over my hands made the air temperature change. He slid his fingers around my waist with such elegant discretion that it did not even disturb the rose I was holding. "The rose bush is in good hands," he whispered in my ear. I smiled, feeling his warmth against my back. Imogen would say otherwise. Imogen dramatizes anything she cannot put on a canvas. Laughter escaped me without me being able to, prevent it. He tilted his face and left a brief, almost shy kiss on my temple, one of those that carry more words than any speech. "You know," he murmured, "there were times when I watched you from afar, when you still walked through the conservatory without knowing I existed, and I desired what I could not even touch. I felt my heart hold its breath. It seemed like a distant dream," he continued, "an improper fantasy for a duke, something only the winter could explain. The delusion of wanting the impossible." I turned to face him. His eyes, always so contained, shone with a tenderness that pierced me. "And now?" I asked, touching the hand that held mine. Adrian smiled, that rare smile, which still broke down every defense in me. Now I am a happy man, and it was there, in that simple moment, with the garden fragrant at the end of the afternoon, with his hands enveloping mine, that I realized I could no longer keep my secret alone. I caressed his face, bringing our bodies closer until our breaths touched. "Adrian," I murmured, "there is something I need to tell you." His expression changed, not with worry, but with full attention. He always offered me that, the certainty of being heard. Then I took his hands and placed them on my belly. "It happened before I could understand," I whispered with tear-filled eyes. "But now I know that our house will grow, that our love has already borne fruit." For an instant, silence reigned, a full, overflowing silence. Adrian's eyes closed, as if he sought strength, or faith, or gratitude wherever it might reside. When he opened them, there were contained tears. There was reverence. There was something too immense to be named. "Elena," his voice trembled. "My love, my miracle." He pulled me into his arms, holding me as one protecting his own destiny. "I swore I would make this house a home," he murmured against my hair. "But you turned it into the future." And as the sun set, coloring the sky with gold and rose, he kissed me, a sweet, deep kiss, so full of hope that I felt the whole world quiet around us. That was the beginning of our new chapter, of the life that was to come, of the heart that would be born, of the love that would no longer be just ours, of the love that would now be a legacy. And then, 3 winters passed.
Winter arrived early in Ravenshire that year, but for the first time the cold meant nothing to me, not like before, because the man I was had died. There, that night under the snow, when I kissed the woman I never forgot. Today I observed through the main hall window the same conservatory that once seemed too empty to me. Now, it blooms, and inside it, among lavenders, white roses, and small sprigs of verbena, Elena walks with our daughter in her arms, the wool cloak on her, shoulders sways in the wind, and little Elise, 2 years old with dark hair and attentive eyes, touches each flower as if blessing the garden with her presence. "Daddy!" she shouts when she sees me, and runs, with the uncertain steps and the certainty of the innocent. I bend down to receive her in my arms, and when I look up, there is Elena, my Duchess, my light, the only truth that remained from all the silences I lived. She smiles at me as if the years had not passed, but they have, and they healed us of everything we lacked. The house lives. Julian manages part of the obligations that once I entrusted to him as a veiled punishment, and which he now carries out with the charm of one who discovered that being responsible does not exclude being irresistible. After all, they steward the future husband of the charming Lady Rensford needed to carry some weight, did he not? Imogen travels, writes, paints, and loves, always in her inimitable way. Her poetic letters fill the house in her absence, and every now and then a canvas that captures what words dare not say. Joan, now housekeeper of the North Wing, commands the servants with gentle firmness, but it is to my Duchess that she devotes her true vows of loyalty, with the same tenderness of one who saw her flourish where many only saw silence. And the gardener, Thomas, he finally found a love that smiles back at him, a kind of love that does not hesitate, does not suffer in secret, does not shrink in the shadow of another name. And for that I respect him even more. And we are peace. At night, Elena still reads before sleeping in my arms, and I watch her as I always did, from the moment I saw her in the light of the entrance, graceful, refined, and serene. But now she knows that she is mine, not because a ring binds her, but because it was I who surrendered. And when she rests her head on my chest, with a light sigh and her fingers intertwined with mine, I hear her murmur, "It is still my favorite name when said by you." I close my eyes, and I know I have won, because in the end, the man who scorned her was the same one who knelt to adore her, and what was born between us, between duty and desire, between pride and fall, was love, the rarest, the most improbable, the most eternal, the one that is only born when one has the courage to lose everything, to finally gain what one never had, her, my sweet Elena.
And time, always discreet, took its course within the walls of Ravenshire. Our family grew, and with it, the purpose of everything we built. After our daughter came Richard and Benjamin. Richard, the firstborn, carried on his shoulders Adrian's calm and determined posture, a living reflection of the future Duke of Ravenshire. Benjamin, the youngest, came into the world with easy laughter and a lightness so contagious that even Julian said he saw his own irreverent soul in him. The house, once marked by silences, filled with small footsteps, laughter, evenings around the fireplace, and a simple yet profound beauty that only the daily life of a true home can offer. And Adrian remained ever more in love with the woman he chose to live with. I reciprocated in exact measure, because between us, there was always the same silent agreement: to walk together, to share the weight of the days, to celebrate tenderness, and to cultivate, until the last breath, the profound love that made us more than Duke and Duchess. It made us an entire lifetime.
If you have reached this point, then you know this was not just the story of a duke and a companion. It was about the love that defies the impossible and transforms everything. If this love touched your heart, if at some point you wished to be there, hearing your name as Elena heard hers, then this story is also yours. Write here in the comments, "I choose love." I want to know how many hearts found shelter in this romance. And if this video made you sigh, leave your like so that more people can find it. Share it with a romantic friend who still believes in the power of a well-told story. And of course, if you are not yet part of our family of listeners, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and click the hype button. May God bless you with joy and true love. Stay tuned. Other stories are already on the way, and I will be here, waiting for you, always. I will see you in the next video, here on the Velvet Hearts Romances channel.